Hi, I'm Zibby Owens, the creator and host of the award-winning podcast that you're listening to right now. Thank you so much, called Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. It is a daily podcast, 365 days a year, and each day we talk to an author about all of the things related to their career, their book, their life, and more in 30 minutes or less, because who has time? I am now an author myself, although I wasn't when I started this podcast, and you can get my new memoir, Bookends, a memoir of love, loss, and literature, wherever books are sold starting July 1st, and my children's book, Princess Charming. You can learn more about me at zibbyowens.com, but really you're here to learn more about the authors, and that is what we're going to do. Also, be sure to check out all the other podcasts in the Zcast Podcast Network. You can learn more at zcastnetwork.com and definitely check out those shows as well. David Ambroz is the author of A Place Called Home, a memoir, which if you follow me on Instagram, you will see that I selected as my book of the year, which I wasn't even going to do, but I loved it so much that I was trying to make a statement and say, literally, this is the best book I read this year. It's the most inspiring, amazing story, and you really all have to read it. It is so good. I could not put it down. David's life has been just a huge story of resilience, overcoming, and making a difference, and the power of being a kind person. And oh my gosh, it's changed my life. So anyway, more about him. David is a national poverty and child welfare expert and advocate. He was recognized by President Obama as an American champion of change. He currently serves as the head of Community Engagement West for Amazon, coordinating with nonprofits and community leaders for social good. Previously, he led corporate social responsibility for Walt Disney Television and served as the president of the Los Angeles City Planning Commission and as a California Child Welfare Council member. After growing up homeless and then in foster care, he graduated from Vassar and later from UCLA School of Law. He is a foster dad and lives in Los Angeles, California. You literally all have to go read this book. You'll hear me just like swoon over David and his story, but I was even inspired to donate significantly to Together We Rise to help foster youth. And if you are so moved, it's called Together We Rise, and you can join me in doing that. But listen to the podcast. You'll see why he's so wonderful. And then please go buy the book, read the book, really read it. It took me one day. I just stopped everything else because I was so immersed. I hope you feel the same way. Welcome, David. Thank you so much for coming on Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books to discuss A Place Called Home, a memoir.
Thank you so much.
As you know, I've been stalking you, I feel like, on my DMs because I read your whole book. I had started it, of course, before, but I finally had time to read the whole thing and could not put it down. Finished it in one day. It's amazing. Oh. Your story is amazing. Your writing is amazing. The whole thing. My hat's off to you. It's amazing.
Thank you. So. Well, very grateful, and I'm also want to hug you for reading it all in one day. I think it's a lot, and a lot of folks have expressed similarly. But I know that it's a lot to get through. There's a lot of just real experiences that I had that have been daunting for folks to read through. Not just because they had the same thing, but it's related to their own life. So. Thank you for spending the time with little David Ambroz.
Yes, that was my Thanksgiving. In fact, my brother was a little annoyed at the end. He's like, "You were in a book all day again. Come on." And I was like, "No, it was just such a good book." I was like,
"Is anyone surprised? Do they know you? Come on."
They know me. I know. I was like, I was in the room where the football was going on. I just, I don't want to watch football.
Gosh.
I want to read, it was nothing personal. But it was so fitting to read on Thanksgiving. And it actually, it helped, not helped, but it gave so much more meaning to the day and the sense of family and what you went through and making sure, we all say, "Oh, we're so grateful, blah, blah, blah." But hearing your story from start to finish and what you went through and your search for family and what the bad lottery card you were dealt in your life, basically, and how you've overcome everything was the perfect thing. So, okay, I'll stop fawning, but why don't you tell listeners a little about what your memoir is really about and why you decided to share your very, very personal story and, as you said, some very painful moments with the rest of us.
Yeah. My story began 40 plus years ago in New York City. I was born into homelessness. A lot of folks have asked me, kind of about the before time. And I don't have a before time. I never remember a place where we lived, a place we would call home. We constantly were moving from my earliest memory, living in the nooks and crannies of New York City and then other places ultimately. And it was about survival. You know, it was about where the next meal is coming from. It was about what violence is going on around us. It was in the midst of a city that was grappling with an AIDS epidemic that I didn't understand. And we were going from shelter to train station to park and around and around. You know, I had a brother and a sister. I have a brother and a sister I'm still very close with, and a mom who was cursed with a mental illness. And I actually start the book with a dedication to my mom. And I think, as you read, I love her very much. In fact, I'm actually her caregiver today, all these years later. And I start the dedication to my mom because one of the messages in the book I hope people get is how painful it is to lose a family member to mental health. That so many people in our country are robbed because of this criminal called mental health. And we don't talk about it. And we don't support families that are grappling with someone that might have some challenges. So my mom gets the first page of the book. It's dedicated to my mom, who taught me to conquer one impossible thing at a time and to forgive. We went through that whole cycle of poverty and then ultimately ended up in foster care. And I say to folks, and I mean this, is that I learned when I went into foster care that hell had a basement. And what I experienced there, I only talk about a few of the foster homes. And other than one wonderful foster family, I had a really negative experience for many reasons. But again, I hope folks don't walk away condemning social workers or foster parents. I hope what they realize is, what have we individually done to support foster kids and these people that are actually opening up their homes, imperfect as they are? So I went through foster care, separated from my siblings, and ultimately committed a little bit of fraud and got a grant to study in Spain, where I really began the process of rebuilding a human out of the pieces of almost 18 years of violence and poverty.
Oh my goodness. Do you feel that your mother's mental illness was something that, with the right treatment and medication, she could have overcome? Like you say, you're her caregiver now, and I really am dying for like the PS to this book, but like, is there an alternate world where you feel like, had she just been on the right meds, or had she just been in a facility, the abuse and the horrifying events that she inflicted upon your siblings would be remedied? Like, was that a possibility?
So, 2/3 of the kids entering foster care are there because of neglect, which is a euphemism for poverty. So we're breaking up families because people missed a rent check or can't provide food. More than half the schools in the country provide free lunch to the majority of their students, which means their parents aren't eating. So my mom is not one of those 2/3 that are entering because of neglect. We were in the system because we desperately needed to be out of her custody. Her mental health issues are treatable. However, it doesn't mean that she's going to be quote unquote normal. She can never parent. She should never have parented. And that will just be the rest of her life. And from her earliest teenage years, as I understand it, was her situation she was in. However, what she did to us and what we survived can't compare in my mind to the jail that she's in. My mom is in a prison of delusions and has been since she was a child. And I can't imagine what it's like to live like that, constantly fearful, constantly. So her illness, while we can mitigate it with medication, and she's stable now and has housing, it will never be quote unquote cured. It can be treated, it can be mitigated, and my mom can live a decent, humane life, not devolving on the streets of the city, afraid of shadows. And that is the best we can hope for. And that's what I'm very proud and humbled to have the responsibility to do for my mom.
I mean, the empathy that you're showing, like this could have gone in so many ways. Like to say, I find it hard to believe there could be anything worse than some of the things that you endured. And to say that it would be worse for her, even though she inflicted it, is just the most sort of magnanimous act of generosity of spirit, really, to even say.
Well, I mean, thank you. And I got a little chills. It's hard, when people hurt you, it's really hard. But the thing I've always been able to do, and it's like yoga, you have to practice it. And I'm speaking probably to a bunch of moms. It's my mother. And my mom, if she had cancer, we wouldn't condemn her. We would love her. We would put ourselves in a color and march. But because of what she has certain manifestations, she has certain outbursts, she has certain violences. And it doesn't mean I can be okay with that, like the physical pain, the near-death experiences, but it's my mom. And I don't want my mom suffering. And I choose not to be mad at my mom because of this illness she has. And it's something I have to visit. And my siblings aren't the same. All of us have different resolutions with her. And I'm much more involved in her life than my siblings are. And that's fine. That's my choice. But there's so many kids that have parents with mental health issues, and they just suffer. And I want people to see a different route. I want people to have empathy towards these women like my mom who are poor and suffering, and not condemn her.
I mean, I think one of the many things you did so well is point out in a very sort of analytical way, as you describe your own emotional journey, some of the barriers and systemic issues that are facing people in poverty, people in foster care, all of these things, including something like not only mental health treatment, but even healthcare for kids, even your teeth, with your teeth. Oh my gosh. All these, the basic things that you're like, well, here are the 8 million reasons why this is not happening and that's not happening. And here's what happens as a result of that. And, what you gently do at the end of every chapter almost is say like, okay, we are all culpable here. Like, this is not the fault of this one family. This is our system letting this happen. And everyone reading this, everyone is a part of this. It is not just the perpetrators. Like, talk a little about that.
I got chills again. It's beautiful to be seen and to have someone understand what I was trying to do, which is, this is not a bucket of things that happened to me, nor am I throwing stones at people that wronged me. It's not what this is about. It's not what my life's about. I think of poverty as women's work, not because I think it should be, but because that's what our society has done. The majority of people suffering in poverty that have children are women and moms. And that system that we have, we need an army of women probably and their allies to fix it. Because people like my mom and without mental health issues are put through the grinder. We had to have an address in order to apply for rental assistance. We had to have an address to receive food stamps. We didn't have either of those things. It's insane. And I remember I had this analogy in my mind kind of as I was growing up. It's like the families are living in poverty in the water and they're drowning. And this lifeboat comes along. And this person reaches out and pulls the person out of the water, and the woman and the children go, and they breathe in deeply. They're like, thank you. And then the program drops them. But don't worry, there's another program in the boat that's going to lift them out for 2 minutes. What if we pulled the person out of the water and put them in the damn boat? Humans are messy. There's not a solution. So we need a systematic approach to lift people out of poverty. But here's the kicker. We're doing it. In my lifetime, we've halved the number of kids living in poverty. If we constantly scream fire, no one wants to go into that building. We have to actually pay people to go into burning buildings. The public needs to understand we're winning. We just have to work harder and faster because the kids need us to. So I think poverty programs, imperfect as they are, we have to stop denigrating government. We are the government. I am here today because of imperfect food stamps, imperfect rental assistance, imperfect violence mitigation programs, imperfect schools, and yet here I am. I think we have to honor that and make them work harder and better. And we can do that. I read the other day, and it goes to your earlier question, why did I write this? There are 118,000 homeless children in New York City. Yes, that's right. People are like, no, 118,000. Think about the town you grew up in and imagine they're all children. We have to work harder, better, and faster, but we're doing it. And I'm very optimistic we can do it. We have to design systems that embrace messiness. I worked on extending foster care to 21 because who is truly independent at 18? Who's independent at 30? So we're making progress. And I'm very, very bullish on our capability as a people. I think Americans are inherently good. I mean, I fundamentally believe that despite everything. And we just have to tap into that well of goodness to motivate our elected people to work harder and faster, to lift people like my family up, to support good systems that don't abuse kids, and we can do it.
Do you think so you thought through the whole system, and obviously you become an advocate for it, and we get to walk through the journey, and you're the one, where is it, in New Jersey or somewhere, where you took the train and now sat there and you came up with all these brilliant ways of, can you give foster parents pensions, and like, let's give incentives for people to do this in another way. Like, let's see what we can do. And you've rethought the system from the inside out, and you are the perfect person, right, to be the change maker in this area. Is there like a privatized foster care system? Is there something else other than, because I feel like one of the messages at the end is make sure to elect the right people to the positions who can affect these changes. And, a lot goes into each candidate. Like, is it all on them? Like, what else can we as citizens do to help? Like, I'm sitting here in New York City, and I'm like, 118,000 kids are outside the window. Like, what can we do today to help? And there are so many different nonprofits and organizations helping, but like, if there was some way to have been helped, either systemically, individually, where, and what can people listening do? That was a lot.
That's the most important question. And first, read the afterword, as you're referencing. That's like a very mapped out approach to how we can fix it. First and foremost, what I ask folks to do is close their eyes and imagine putting their own child into foster care. And what does that system look like? That is what we need to build. We don't need to fix this or tweak that or blah, blah, blah. If we don't have that, that's the problem. And that's why we have the system and the outcomes we have today. So if you're always wondering out there, what do we do? Constantly put yourselves in that moment where I have to put the most precious thing to me in the custody of the state. Who's in charge? What are they doing? What do the frontline workers look like? What are they acting like? What are their incentives? And if we don't have that, you need to constantly be steering the ship towards it. And that steering is going to depend on your resources, both economic and time and capacity and whatever measurement. So I don't ask everyone to help every single homeless person off the street. That's just not realistic. In fact, it'll do the opposite. It'll make you jaded. Instead of starting every sentence, as we often do as people, is I can't because. We have to reorient. We are a country that sent a person to the moon. And now we are proud when we fill a pothole. We shouldn't be proud of that. We should get back to that energy as a country and as a people where we can send people to other planets. Okay, great. What does that mean in physical reality? It's not enough once every couple of years to vote. It's just not enough. It does not, this or a democracy or a republic make. We have to be engaged as citizens. And I love your pod, especially as moms. Every time I watch an election, they're always talking about the moms. Where are the moms? Where are the suburban moms? Where are the moms? And they've evolved, right? Like soccer moms, this mom, Latina moms. Like it's always moms because it's the beating heart of our country. And I think constantly about how do I reach these people that are like my mom, loved us imperfectly, but loved us, because that empathy is what we need, a tsunami of it into our politics. Not since 1999 has a presidential debate brought up child poverty. Every single debate has talked about coal miners, which we should talk about. There's a couple thousand of them. There are 8.4 million children in America living in poverty. 8.4. Why don't we talk about it? Well, who's going to start that conversation? But people that are parents, moms. We have to ask our elected leaders, every school board meeting, I want a mom to go there and be like, how are you helping homeless children? Do you have a food bank there for kids? Do you have a clothing closet? How do you integrate a kid that's from foster care that's just popped into the school? Are they allowed to play sports? Do they need fees? I'll raise money for that. Constantly, if that's your capability, ask that question. Maybe you're married to an elected. Maybe you aren't elected. Constantly bring this stuff up, right? Because women are in office. Women have power. Women are moms. We can do this. We can integrate this population in our hearts and minds. Children, we should be constantly talking about them, but we don't. People know every single member of the Supreme Court. How many of us know our school boards? When I think about equity, when I think about the murder of George Floyd, No one can name a local Superior Court judge, but they're the ones who convict young boys of color. But we know and we fetishize politics in DC. Why don't we look local and see what we can do as individuals? If you walk by a homeless person and you think, I can't because fine, I get it. I do that too. But the pivot, the fundamental change, the moonshot for children in poverty is to then switch and go, what can I do? And for each of us, that's going to be different. I have a afterword in my book. It's a policy document. It's a love letter. It's very simply written, trying to get folks to focus on foster care as a fulcrum point where we can change things and intervene. But what I hope we do is reorient ourselves to be a country that sends people to the moon, is a country that wants to end child poverty, because we must.
Okay, you need to run for president. That's my why would you not do that? Like, you're the perfect, like, this is like, so many people are so negative. There's so much divisive chatter. Everything is like what we can't do, and it all seems so dire and terrible. And here you are, you're like, I have faith. I'm like, really? You're the one?
Yes, I do. I have like endless faith. Like I'm sitting here in my home. I own my home. I own my home, folks. Like, I was the president of the Planning Commission of Los Angeles. And I remember when the mayor appointed me, which is the person who oversees real estate and all sorts of things. And the Mayor Garcetti, appointed me. And I'm like, Mayor, like, are you sure? And he's like, you're absolutely the right person to do this. And I sat up there for 7.5 years, overseeing real estate construction, home development, all this stuff, cannabis, home sharing. And I remember sitting up there all the time being like, I had a little bit of the imposter syndrome. And I just thought about the 4-year-old boy living in Grand Central or in the nooks and crannies of the city. And I'm like, I'm going to imbue everything that I do and remember. And this one guy I got up there, I remember he was arguing against a shelter for women and children. He's a member of the public, came to testify. And he said, if these women can't handle their kids, they should have had abortions. And I'm like, I'm going to get emotional now. Like, I'm dying, because there's these women from the shelter that are sitting in the front row that are having to hear this vitriol, this hate, which is what our public debate has devolved into. And I did a point of order, and I interrupted him, and I just said, hey, if you're trying to convince me to vote against a shelter for women and children by saying my mom should have aborted me and my siblings, you're not going to get my vote. We need an army of people. In what other country would I even be alive? What other time would I be alive? Never mind having one of the most powerful positions, to shut that down, to vote for that project. And I am so bullish that we can do more. We've halved the number of kids in poverty, folks. Let's do that again every 2 years until it's 0. We can do it.
Gosh. I know I've been talking a lot about what we can take away from the book, and I'm not showing as much in the book, because I feel like it's so important for people to hear what you have to say, having gone through all of what you went through, just by reading. There's also this whole element of the sexuality discrimination that you went through, and having so many people trying to change you, and you're having to come to terms with that and not feeling like there is a home for you sort of within the system. Talk about that a little. David is showing us a Mickey Mouse hat with rainbow ears. That moment, by the way, the end of the chapter about Disney World, I literally closed the book for a minute, and I was like, I have chills up and down my body. This is and I read it out loud. I read that section out loud to my husband, because I was like, listen to this. Anyway.
Well, I want to talk about Disney, but I also want to talk about the fact that your bookshelf is rainbow, which I love. My lessons about my sexual orientation began as a child. I was in New York City, and I didn't understand it, but I sort of understood it, was all around me were young men dying of AIDS. They were in the shelters, they were on the streets, and the lesson was profoundly clear. And I was a child. I didn't understand it exactly, but I sort of understood, as kids do these things in general, is that this is wrong. I am wrong. There's something wrong with me, and this is what's going to happen. And then, in most states, it was illegal for me to even have consensual sex until I was in my 30s. When I went into foster care, I was diagnosed with something at the time. It's still in the DSM, but it's differently applied. It's called gender identification disorder. And through active therapy, malpractice, I would say, and physical and other violence throughout my time, except for Holly and Steve, my foster parents, folks tried to make me less gay. I could just tell the listeners that I am a committed homosexual. I'm very happy. but it was violent and painful. But, just like with my mom, I think about my life, and I don't need to be religious or for or against religion to believe that I can't help but think that my life was what it was to make me a tool for good. And one of the goods that I feel that I'm proudest of in my life is I worked very, very much for a very long time to outlaw the curing of gay kids in foster care in our country. And it took until President Obama's second term, but we did it. And I'm very proud to have been part of that, a leader in that movement with Child Welfare League of America and Lambda Legal and others. But if I hadn't had that experience, it wouldn't have lit that fire. And kids today may have still been experiencing some of that horror. So I'm very proud of that work. But that's what I've tried to do with all of these things is say, okay, what can I do with this? What should we do? How can I be part of the solution? How can I stop throwing stones? Because we live in a place where we can actually make the change we want to see. And it took decades. And that was so hard because I knew that every single day kids were going through reparative therapy. I knew about the violence. I knew exactly what they were going through. And it took me decades to deal with it, which is part of the reason you asked first, why did I write the book? Many reasons, one of which was the shame I had for all of the things done to me, all of the things I survived. I was just mortified that if people knew. And I was just done. I would reach my mid-30s and I was like, I got to let this shit go. I got to move forward. I got to release this ballast that's holding me back and let the wind in my sail take me even farther. And part of it was, we're still being debated today, aren't we? Our civil rights are in jeopardy. The Senate is hopefully going to vote in this lame duck session whether or not I can have a relationship that's recognized by the state. The work is not done. But I'm very proud that I took all this horror and did something with it. And my only regret is it took a very long time.
Oh, it didn't take a long time. You're doing such a good job. It's superhuman what you're doing. I literally am sitting here listening to you being like, look at all this love in his heart. I mean, it's so unlikely to have come out of what you went through in this position of kindness and help. And, I know this is what you were like all along, but still, like, to not have been robbed of this, your fundamental goodness as a person is amazing. And it's not like you're doing it every day. I mean, it's amazing. Oh, it's amazing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. And, the work continues. I'm working right now on a project. So a third of the homeless in LA, in most cities, actually, in the country, coastal cities, are former foster kids. A third. We're emancipating kids at 18 to homelessness. And so I'm working on a project to build a dorm at a community college to emancipate them into 2-year vocational or transfer. And we own the land. We have a vocational crisis in the country. These kids are our children as a people. And these are our institutions. We can do this. And that's how I feel so much about all these issues is somehow we have this learned indifference or benign neglect, except it's not benign. We are neglecting the public square. And if I don't channel all this stuff into something, I think I would lose my mind. I think I would be hard and grumpy and I don't know. I always thought of happiness as like a peak. You kind of get to the peak and then you have to fall, you come down and you hopefully get to it again. I'm at a plateau. I'm like chillaxing at the top. I'm super happy. I constantly am like, okay, what can we do? What do I do? And I relax. I bake bread. I'm literally wearing Lululemon pants with a decent shirt. Like I have a good life. But if we kind of renew that faith in each other, it makes us richer. I am happier for it. Like I meet the most interesting people. I advance my career. I have such weird ass adventures. Like who gets recognized by the president of the United States? Like President Obama. Who do you respect more than President Obama? These things are meaningful and they're seen, and we should all be doing more of them. And I kind of love that I've had this Forrest Gump life of mine that's let me have these experiences. Believe it or not.
I feel like your book needs to be a movie. Is it good? I mean, I know it would be hard to watch, but I feel like a lot of people don't read. Not the people listening to this, but have you thought about that?
Well, I think I think we need to use all mechanisms of storytelling. I think the way that we are what are we as a species? What are we as like an animal? We're storytellers.
Mm-hmm.
And, it was verbal before it was written. It was, and now we have all these different mechanisms for doing it. Absolutely. Because it's not going to be a dumpster fire, right? Like there's such love and adventure. Like, I got to live in a church, and I remember watching Harry Potter when he went to live at Hogwarts, and like how, cold and ethereal it all was. And I immediately thought, first of all, he's a foster kid, kinship foster care. I was like, yeah, foster kids. But I also thought, gosh, I know what it's like to live in these big, drafty buildings with nooks and crannies that are just bizarre. And, I think there's adventures and joy. We talk about joy, not just trauma and violence. I had the most amazing foster parents, Holly and Steve. Like, there is so much love. And who doesn't want to watch a movie about love? Like, I think there's big feels in this. So I'm hoping it does become something, and I'm trying. I've talked to a few folks who are like, oh, no one wants to read a book about child abuse. I'm like, this is not a book about child abuse.
No.
It's a book about hope. It's a book about love and the imperfect country we are and people and how we try and be better at it. So I'm hoping, I'm working on it. Maybe someone listening wants to make a movie, call me. Be glad to work with you.
Do you, the part about your mother converting you to Judaism and the way in which you did that, are you Jewish now?
Oh,
Do you
gosh,
identify as Jewish? Just wondering.
Yeah, I am ethnically Jewish. I learned that through doing a DNA test. But I am religious. I just don't think anyone's cornered the market on God. My philosophy and religious belief is that God wants us to be good to each other and the planet. And that's the altar where I worship. And I enjoy the traditions and faiths. Not only was I converted to Judaism, most of the foster homes I was in, with one exception, maybe two, converted me to their religion. So I would just kind of like constantly cycle through. And I kind of joke, and sometimes when I speak to church groups, and I like to say I met God through food. And this is what I mean by that. I used to go to religious institutions. They had free food, and you'd have to get a little proselytized, which is fine by me. But then they would feed you. And it was really good food sometimes, and sometimes it was not. And now I'm homeless and starving. So I ate the food. But I used to think when I was young, I was like, clearly this religion and God are not getting along because their food is so awful. And God would not let them have terrible food. And then I discovered Black Baptists who had delicious food. And I thought, oh gosh, these people are in touch with their God. And then I went to a Unitarian church, and it was the first time I had Indian food, Unitarian Universalists. And it was like chef's kiss, flavor and complexity. And I'm a vegetarian. I wasn't then, but I sort of am innately a vegetarian. I just don't like animal cruelty. And I had never had flavor like that before. And I don't know how old I was, because I don't know how old I was for much of my life. But I was like, these people have a direct line to God. But going through foster care, they would convert me. And it was not as traumatic as the one in the book, but it just taught me that the people that preach the loudest are often the least living up to the values they purport to stand for. So I try to live my life according to my values. I don't try and convert anybody, and I just try to live a meaningful life I enjoy my life, but like the part that I enjoy most is when I'm doing these things. And that's why I wrote the book. How can I use my story to, it's so funny because I cyber stalked you before I knew we had a connection. Because when I was thinking about, because they're like, you have to reach moms. And I'm like, and you're like, because the more I talk to folks throughout my life before the book, they're like, you need just an army of moms behind you, because this is like your demo. Like these are the more I've talked to people around the country, the more I'm like, yes, I do. Because I think moms and are just inherently more empathetic, because you have to be. I have a foster son. This is my foster son.
Oh, he's old. I mean, he graduated college already? Oh my gosh.
Right. He's in grad school. Yeah, he came older. But he changed me. He changed me. He made me a different human, much more aware, painful, love. He's the most important thing I've ever done, and opened up parts of my heart I didn't even know were closed. And so I think that feeling that we have as parents is so profound. And that's what I hope this thing lights the fire. We can do this. We can change. We can love. We can share the love that we have for our own family with the community. We have community. It's called a country. Like, we can do this in our cities, in our towns. We can change it. Do you know, I learned a fact of the day, which I have to verify, but I believe it's true. Not a single member of the school board where I live has a kid in school.
Huh.
We have to get hyper local. We have to figure out what we can do in our communities so that people like my son, who grew up in foster care with me as well, has a different outcome. We can share the love we have for our own kids with other people and each other.
Amazing. I have a bazillion more things to talk to you about, but I don't want to go on too long or no one will listen. So thank you for coming on. Thank you for sharing your story and for just being the beautiful human being that you are. It's really inspiring and amazing.
Thank you so much. I really, really appreciate it.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Don't forget to follow me on Instagram at Zibby Owens and at Moms Don't Have Time to Read Books. Also sign up for my newsletter at zibbyowens.com and sign up for my virtual book club and meet lots of authors on Zoom every other week. Thanks so much to Steve and Ryan at Texture Sound for the sound editing. And thank you to Morning Moon Productions for providing this fantastic intro and outro music.